Welcome to the Valley Avon Podcast, a weekly podcast provided by Valley Community Baptist Church, located in Avon, Connecticut.
So as we think about seasoning the Spirit, last week we talked about rhythms of engaging, and this week we are thinking about rhythms of disengaging, habits that help us to disengage. Disengaging does not come easy to me. I had an opportunity to take a class with Dallas Willard, but it involved a silent retreat, and I said no. Now, Dallas Willard's name may not mean anything to you, but he means a lot to me. He's a philosopher, a theologian, and an author. Dallas Willard's writings have deeply influenced me, and in my doctoral program, I had an opportunity to take a class with Dallas Willard. It was going to be a 2-week seminar with a week of instruction, a second week of instruction, and in between, over the weekend, a 48-hour silent retreat. But I could not face the thought of being alone with nothing but the voices in my head for 48 hours because I told myself, I'm an extrovert. I have to be around people. I have to be with people, and I don't like being alone. So over that silent retreat, I turned down the opportunity to take a class with Dallas Willard. Disengaging is not natural for me. And yet, as we think about seasoning the Spirit, my own experience with steak makes me take a step back from that thought and ask some new questions. Last week when we were talking about engaging, I told you a lot about images of cooking, and some of you asked me later, do you like to cook? Are you a good cook? Answer is no, I'm terrible. But I do like to grill occasionally. And one of the things that I love to grill is steak. And one of the things I've learned from grilling steak is that steak needs time to rest to be its best. If you're going to grill a steak, the best thing to do is ahead of time, let the steak come up to room temperature. And after you're done grilling and you're ready to take it off the grill, the steak needs 5 minutes to rest. It keeps cooking and the juices keep distributing throughout the steak. And if you want that steak to be its best, it's going to need 5 minutes to rest. And disengaging, if it's important in so many types of cooking, and it is, does it not stand to reason that some type of disengaging is important in our lives as well? Disengaging is when we pull back from normal life, from our routines and from our distractions. We pull back from normal life, and that's when we begin to see that, wow, this normal life that we're living, it doesn't actually make sense. We pull back from our routines, and that's when we open up the space to have a special time with God. We pull back from distractions, and that's when we begin to hear the voice of God. Keeping Sabbath is one way that we can disengage, and we are actually going to look at the habit of keeping Sabbath today in some detail. But really what we're thinking about is disengaging, and disengaging is one of those ways that God seasons our spirits. Remember, we're saying this month that God is like a master chef, and we are like a set of ingredients. And God is taking us into his kitchen, and he is adding the seasoning of the Holy Spirit and the heat of life experiences. And in his hands, we can then become a master dish. Last week we said that engaging takes us into the master's kitchen, but this week we discover that, sometimes disengaging is a shortcut to the master's stove. As we think about Sabbath today, we discover that we disengage to rest. In Exodus chapter 16, verses 22 and 23, we read that God is providing for his people in order that something might happen. Let's look at those two verses again. We read, on the 6th day, they gathered, this is the people, twice as much bread. 2 omers each. And when all the leaders of the congregation came and told Moses, he said to them, "This is what the Lord has commanded. Tomorrow is a day of solemn rest, a holy Sabbath to the Lord. Bake what you will bake and boil what you will boil, and all that is left over lay aside to be kept till the morning." Now see, in this passage, the children of Israel had recently been set free from slavery in Egypt. God is taking them through the wilderness, and in the wilderness, God is providing everything that they need. You see, God's providing them every evening quail. Quail come into camp so that they can find a source of food. And then the next morning, every morning, the ground is covered with a dew that dries into a sweet bread-like substance called manna that they pick up. But the truth of the matter is that's bread for them for the day, because in the 6 days of the week, if they keep that bread overnight, it rots overnight. But then comes the 6th day, and God says on the 6th day, I want you to gather twice as much of this manna bread as you need. And he said there's going to be miraculous provision. It's not going to spoil overnight. Because God is providing everything that the people need for a day of rest. You see, Sabbath is a day of rest. Now, as the Bible talks about Sabbath, you can get into the language of command and obligation, but at its heart, Sabbath is a gift. In fact, in the New Testament, when Jesus speaks about Sabbath, he says, you got to correct your misconceptions about Sabbath. Sabbath is a gift to you. It's a gift to humanity. And here out in the wilderness, we can see in part why. Here's a gift being given to a group of people who just a short time before had been slaves. In slavery in Egypt, the people of Israel had toiled day after day after day at someone else's command with no break. And yet here in the wilderness, God says, I am giving you a day of rest. Can you imagine what that would have felt like after all those years to get a day of rest? That's what Sabbath is. It's a gift, and it's wonderful. I like to use my Sabbath on Sunday to get a really good nap. In fact, later this afternoon, when we are done here, I am going to nap. And on Sundays, I don't set an alarm when I nap. I have slept on Sunday afternoons for 3 hours solid. I know some of you can't nap. That is not a problem that I have. I can fall asleep within 30 seconds anytime. Napping is the easy part. It's what happens when I wake up from the nap that's difficult. Because when I wake up from the nap, that desire, that need to work kicks in pretty quickly. Several times on Sunday afternoons, despite the fact that I'm thinking of it as my Sabbath, I get on my lawn tractor and start mowing. And I'll tell myself, I like mowing. I love sitting on the back of my lawn tractor. Mowing is relaxing to me. And the truth of the matter is that it is relaxing to me. But also the truth of the matter is that I'm not doing it because it's relaxing. I'm doing it because I didn't have a chance to get it done the rest of the week, and the grass is so tall that I'm going to have a problem if I don't get it done. What does that make it? It makes it work. It makes it work. And while we want to avoid legalism when it comes to our keeping of Sabbath, we also don't want to settle for excuses. Because Sabbath is an opportunity, an invitation to rest, and it is important to us. It's built into, it's baked into our very nature. We may find things like rest and Sabbath difficult, but it's fundamental to who we are. Way back in the beginning of the Old Testament, the Bible tells us that God created everything in 6 days, and then the Bible says, and God rested on the 7th. And then we read, well, God created us in his own image. We're created in the image of God, and that means that we're like him. We're like him in the fact that we get 6 days of work, and then it's time for a day of rest, a day for something else. In fact, that is the very justification that the 10 Commandments gives us. When the 10 Commandments command humanity, command people to rest on a Sabbath day, in Exodus chapter 20, verse 11, we read why? Why? Because For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea and all that is in them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. Well, what does that say? That says that in part the Sabbath is a matter of holiness, but it says as well that it's a matter of nature. We may think that our nature is to toil, but the Bible says our nature is Sabbath. Sabbath is our human nature, created in God's image. What difference would Sabbath keeping make to your Monday morning? Imagine if you had a Sabbath behind you and you hit a Monday morning. Of course, you'd be more rested. But it would change the nature of Monday morning as well, because if you're going to keep Sabbath at some point during the week, then it makes the other 6 days of the week different. You have to prepare for Sabbath for the other 6 days a week. But not only that, it makes our lives different, because it causes us to ask what is essential and what can go in our lives to create room for rest on Sabbath. But if we did, we would be much, much healthier. Much, much more human. And much, much more seasoned with the flavors of heaven. We disengage to rest. And we disengage to trust God. God was trying to teach the people of Israel to trust him. Just a short time before, he had set the people of Israel free from slavery in Egypt. And he did it miraculously. And then God broke the power of Egypt and of Pharaoh and destroyed the Egyptian armies. He brought the people of Israel into the wilderness where there was no water, and then provided them water from nothing. Out in the wilderness, he provided them with food. And he provided them with a food that if they tried to hold on to too much of it, it would rot. But then on the sixth day, he gave them double and the miraculous promise that if you keep this food, it will not rot. This food will not rot. God was trying to season the spirits of the people of Israel and to teach them to trust him. We as Christ followers need this learning, this seasoning in our lives as well, and Sabbath provides it. And you say, well, wait a minute, does Sabbath keeping apply to us as Christ followers as well? Because some will say that Sabbath keeping is just one of those Old Testament traditions, like the dietary laws, and that when you get to the New Testament, it goes away, but it's grounded in God's nature. It is affirmed by Jesus, and it exists in the Ten Commandments, which is the moral law. So it still applies to us in some way, but the question is how? Well, how? Well, many Christians have moved Sabbath keeping from the seventh day to the first day to align with worship, because we gather for worship. We gather in Jesus' name because Jesus rose from the dead on the first day of the week. That's one way that it changes. But for Christ followers, we always want to avoid legalism, and we want to avoid license. It's a more nuanced and fresh approach to keeping Sabbath. One Christian tradition writes in what's called the Westminster Shorter Catechism, where they describe their beliefs and their practices. They write about it: the Sabbath day is to be sanctified by a holy resting all that day. It's important for us to figure out how Sabbath keeping can unfold in our lives, because keeping Sabbath pushes and pulls against that self-reliance that is so natural to us. You see, in the text as it unfolds, we meet some people in Israel who are very self-reliant, and let's be honest, we recognize these people. They saw everything. They heard everything. They saw the food being gathered. They heard the commands from God given through Moses and their leaders. They knew that the command was given to rest on the seventh day. No food would come. Use what you gathered on the sixth day. And yet the seventh day comes, and what were they doing? They were up early. They were outside looking to gather the manna. They were looking for God to have provided manna on the seventh day, and they were going to gather it. Why? Because they're responsible. They're taking care of things. They're self-reliant. Got to take care of business. And we get that. We recognize that because we're self-reliant people as well. We want to take initiative and take care of things ourselves. But disengaging and Sabbath keeping pulls against that self-reliance in us. Sabbath keeping and all kinds of disengaging teach us to trust God. And when you are trusting someone else to provide for you, it's kind of hard to look at yourself as completely self-reliant. Disengaging pulls against our pride. And that means disengaging is really good for our souls. We disengage to trust God, and we disengage to hunger for God. You see God creating the space for people, his people, to hunger for him. He sees that some people are out there on the seventh day doing exactly what he told them not to do, and you can read, God is frustrated by what they did. But when he speaks on it, he just reaffirms the position. He said, wait a minute, guys, I see what you're doing. What is wrong with you? The seventh day is a day of rest. It's a day to come aside. And then God makes it just as clear and as plain as he can. Stay home. Just stay home. Stay in your place. And then we read, somehow it registered with people. They stayed home. Because in verse 30, we read, so the people rested on the seventh day. God is creating the space. He's provided the food. He's provided the time. And he said, what I want from you today is your food needs are met. It's for you to remember the hunger that you have inside for me. Wendell Berry is a poet who has written beautifully about how you can find extraordinary things in ordinary moments. He writes about the most mundane of things in ways that just bring out their deeper meaning. Some of his poems have actually touched me deeply. And Wendell Berry writes about keeping Sabbath. And in one of his poems, he describes how he has kept Sabbath and then gone for a walk on a Sabbath day. Sabbath 1999, number 7. He writes about his experience. He writes this, even in me, the maker of all this returns in rest, even to the slightest of his works, a yellow leaf slowly falling, and is pleased. Now, this is not a poem of nature worship. This isn't a poem where he's saying, you know what, if you skip church and go out in the woods and you'll meet God. That's not what he's saying at all. What he's saying is, as you keep Sabbath and you still your life, you begin to see in the simplest of things that God is there and that he's been there all along. And the alternative Wayne Muller talks about is that we get caught in what he calls a horrific wonderland. Warren Muller is Wayne Muller. It's too many poets, right? Warren Muller is not a Christ follower, but he writes about the way that biblical tradition interfaces with real life. And he says about all human beings, he says, we need these places that are like oases of holiness, things like Sabbath, because he says if we don't find these in our lives, then what we do is we get caught up in stuff, and it kind of shreds our souls. And he talks about the world out there, and he describes it. He wrote in the late 1990s, and his words are a little bit dated, okay? But if you can add in the layer of cell phones and social media and take out some of the 1990s stuff in this quote, you're going to see that what he's describing is absolutely true. He writes this, when we are in the world with our eyes wide open, the seductions are insatiable. Hundreds of channels of cable and satellite television, Phones with multiple lines and call waiting, begging us to talk to more than one person at a time. Mail, email, and overnight mail. Fax machines. Wow. Billboards, magazines, newspapers, radio. For those of us with children, there are endless soccer practices, baseball games, homework, laundry, house cleaning, errands. Every responsibility, every stimulus competes for our attention. Buy me, do me, watch me, try me, drink me. It is as if we have inadvertently stumbled into some horrific wonderland. Is that not a great quote? This world around us is a wonderland full of good things, full of things that call for our attention. But at the same time, it's horrific because it's a prison. And if we stay there too much, it shreds our souls. So disengaging in things like Sabbath becomes an opportunity not just to stop working, but to worship. Keeping Sabbath is not simply a chance to rest. We come into the presence of God. Now, yes, we do it in public ways like this. And that's an important part of our Sabbath keeping and of our weekly rhythms. At the same time, Sabbath keeping and disengaging is an invitation to step aside from all of those other things, from that horrific wonderland, and to come into the presence of God. And as we do, we are confronted by the presence of God and recognize He's been there all along, and He has been calling to us, calling us into His presence. And we come into the presence of His glory, and we are blown away and recognize that this is what I need. This is what I was created to do. Augustine of Hippo says that is the hunger at the center of our being that we experience. He wrote a beautiful quote about how we experience the hunger. He said, "You have made us for yourself, and our heart is restless until it rests in you." Our heart is restless until it rests in you. We don't always recognize it. We don't always understand it. I haven't always recognized it or understood it, but it's true. There is a gap inside of us that cries out for God Himself. It's like a hunger. And disengaging creates a space in which we can understand and lean into that hunger for God. You see, we disengage from distractions to engage with God. Disengaging pulls against a tug that we all experience, a tug that makes the I wants in our lives into I needs. Our lives are filled with wants, and we want things. We want the corner office. But as soon as we get the corner office, what do we want? We want the upstairs corner office. We want to experience things, but when we experience the country, we want to experience the world. We're always wanting. We're wanting more stuff, more prestige, more friends, more power. We do this to our kids, too. We tell ourselves that we've got to be having our kids have to have state championships, and they've got to get into elite colleges, and we're not satisfied until they've gotten into those positions in life. But here's the thing. We take all those wants and we turn them into needs. It's tugged from want to need. And when I need it, then I've got to do everything that's required to get it. It becomes my obsession in life. And when it becomes my obsession in life, then I build this chaotic life designed to give me everything I want because now I need it. And disengaging pulls us away from that. It says, wait a minute, there's a higher purpose to your life. There are many good ways to disengage. 4 classic Christian ways to engage are Sabbath keeping, fasting, there's simplicity, and there's confession. Sabbath keeping is is disengaging from normal life to make space in our lives for rest and for God. That's what we're talking about today. And then there's fasting, and fasting is disengaging from food in order to realize that our true hunger is for God. There's simplicity, which is disengaging from consumption in order to make room in our lives for generosity, and disengaging from having to have everything to recognizing that God is our true prize. And confession is disengaging from our sin in order that we might be forgiven and free, disengaging from sin in order that we might not carry around the weight of guilt. And these are just 4 classic ways that you can disengage. And if you look out in the lobby, there's some books at the Resource Center that can tell you more about those classic ways to disengage and other disciplines that can help you disengage as well. But Psalm 42, verses 1 and 2 tells us even more about this yearning at the center of our souls. And it describes it this time not as a hunger, but as a thirst. Psalm 42, verses 1 and 2 reads, "As a deer pants for flowing streams, so my soul pants for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. When shall I come and appear before God?" Now, when it's summer, we kind of get being thirsty, right? We can think about being hot on a summer day and just wanting to chug a nice tall glass of water or jump into a pool. We get thirst like that on a summer day. But there's a thirst that's more subtle. It's a thirst that our brains don't immediately process and know what to do with. In fact, it's a thirst that sets in slowly, and our brains, because they're not recognizing it, tell us that we need something, and it triggers us wanting food. We think we're hungry when we're really thirsty. And so dieters will tell you, if you want to lose weight, you need to, in part, stay hydrated. Because otherwise your brain's going to tell you that you're hungry. And there is something of that going on in our souls as well. We're thirsty for the presence of the living God, but our brains are tricked into telling us that we want something else. We want something more. We want more stuff. We want more power. We want more people. We want more entertainment. We want more excitement. And that's our brains mistaking the thirst inside of us, which is a longing for the presence and the person of God. And we disengage from all these other things in order that we might engage with God. We disengage through disciplines like Sabbath keeping and fasting and simplicity and confession, but the disengaging isn't the point. It has benefits in our lives on its own, but that's not the point. We disengage in order to create room so that the voice of God can speak to us. And in the stillness, we are invited to engage with Him. Feel His presence. Feel His favor on us. If I could go back in time 15 years, I would take that class with Dallas Willard eagerly. I've had 15 years to think about it. 15 years to think about who I truly am and understand myself better. I suppose in 15 years I've probably grown up a little, because I've learned to be comfortable in the silence with nothing but the voice and the companionship of God, because that's when my Father invites me to engage with Him. I'm learning to disengage. And I pray that same blessing for you.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Valley Avon podcast. If you would like to hear more, you can subscribe for free on any platform you use. If you would like to visit us in person or would like to submit a prayer request, you can visit us on the web at avon.valleycommunity.cc. From all of us here at Valley Community Baptist Church, thank you for coming and have a blessed week.